The transport shuttle rattled as it descended through Zenthera 5's violet atmosphere, and Jasper Reed pressed his forehead against the viewport, watching clouds the color of lavender honey swirl past. 3 months on an alien agricultural station? 3 months of testing Earth crops in alien soil? 3 months away from everything familiar? He could do this. He'd spent 2 years on the Mars colonies, after all. How different could it be? Pretty different, as it turned out. The landing pad was a marvel of organic architecture, grown rather than built, its surfaces rippling with bioluminescent patterns. Jasper shouldered his pack and descended the ramp, boots touching alien ground for the first time. The air tasted sweet, almost floral, and the gravity was lighter than Earth's standard but heavier than Mars. Perfect. You must be the human specialist. Jasper turned toward the voice and felt his breath catch slightly. The woman approaching him was humanoid in the basic sensed arms. 2 legs, a head with features he could recognize, but there the similarity ended. Her skin was a deep purple that seemed to shimmer when she moved, like oil on water. Large eyes, violet with gold flecks, dominated her delicate face. And her hair, if it could be called that, was a cascade of silver tendrils that moved with a life of their own. She was, objectively speaking, stunning. That's me, Jasper managed, extending his hand. Jasper Reed, agricultural specialist, crop adaptation expert, and generally handy person to have around plants. She looked at his hand with curious fascination before carefully taking it. Her skin was warm and smooth, her grip surprisingly firm. I am Shivara. I will be your liaison during your stay here. Welcome to the Verdant Station. Her English was perfect, if slightly formal, and her smile revealed teeth that were just slightly more pointed than human normal. Jasper found himself smiling back automatically. Thanks for the warm welcome. I have to say, your station is incredible. Is all of it grown? Most of it, Kivara confirmed, releasing his hand with what seemed like reluctance. We Zentharians prefer to work with living structures rather than dead materials. It is more harmonious with our philosophy. Come, I will show you to your quarters and then give you a tour of the research greenhouses. As they walked through the station's corridors, which were indeed alive, pulsing gently with what Jasper assumed was nutrient flow, he found himself stealing glances at his guide. She moved within a fluid grace that made him feel clumsy by comparison, and there was something about her earnest curiosity that he found immediately appealing. So, Kivara said, as they rode a vertical platform up several levels, I must confess, I am very excited to work with a human. We have had few opportunities for direct cultural exchange. What do you want to know? I'm an open book. Those gold-flecked eyes studied him with an intensity that was both unnerving and thrilling. Everything. Your species fascinates us. You are so adaptable, so diverse in your approaches to life. We're certainly scattered across the galaxy these days, Jasper agreed. Though I think we're still pretty new to this whole interstellar community thing. Lots to learn and to teach, Kivara added. For instance, I have been studying human agricultural practices in preparation for your arrival. The variety of your food cultivation methods is remarkable. The platform stopped, and they stepped out into a curved corridor lined with doors that seemed to grow directly from the walls. Kivara led him to one marked with what he assumed was his name in Zentharian script, along with J. Read in English. These are your quarters, she explained, pressing her palm against the door. It irised open with a soft sigh. I hope they are comfortable. We have tried to accommodate human preferences. The room was surprisingly spacious, with furniture that looked organic but was clearly designed with human proportions in mind. A large window dominated one wall, showing a breathtaking view of the research fields below where rows of both alien and Earth crops grew in neat patterns. This is perfect, Jasper said honestly. Better than my last 3 assignments combined. Kivara's expression brightened in a way that he was learning to recognize as pleased. I am glad. Are you hungry? The dining area serves meals compatible with human digestion. We could eat while I brief you on the station protocols. Sounds great. I'm starving. The food on the transport was... He made a face. Let's just say it was technically edible, Kavera's laugh was like wind chimes, delicate and musical. I understand. Transport rations are universally terrible across all species. Come, I will show you where the good food is. The dining area was a large, airy space with a domed ceiling that showed the violet sky above. Several Xantharians were scattered around various tables, and Jasper noticed the curious glances they threw his way. He was probably the first human most of them had seen in person. Kivara guided him through the food selection process, which involved some kind of computer interface that adjusted for species' dietary requirements. Jasper ended up with something that looked vaguely like a grain bowl with what might have been vegetables. Though the colors were all wrong by Earth standards, they settled at a table near one of the large windows. And Jasper took an experimental bite. The flavor was strange, but not unpleasant, earthy and sweet with an unexpected tang. So, Kivara said, folding her hands on the table in a gesture that seemed almost prim, tell me about Earth customs. We have files, of course, but I find personal accounts much more enlightening. Jasper swallowed his food and shrugged. What do you want to know? We're a pretty diverse bunch. Customs vary wildly depending on where you're from. What about courtship rituals? Kivara asked, her tone purely academic but her eyes sparkling with interest. I understand humans have very complex social protocols around romantic relationships. Jasper nearly choked on his next bite. Of all the topics to jump straight to, but her expression was so earnest, so genuinely curious, that he couldn't help but find it endearing. Yeah, I guess we do, he said, buying time with a sip of water. It varies a lot, like I said. Some cultures are very formal, others are more casual. Generally, involves getting to know someone, showing interest. Asking them out on dates, that's when two people spend time together, specifically to see if they're romantically compatible. Fascinating, Kivara murmured, leaning forward slightly. And these dates? What activities do they involve? Oh, dinner, movies, walks in parks. Talking mostly. Getting to know each other, he grinned. Some people say the way to someone's heart is through their stomach. Through their stomach. Kivara's brow furrowed in confusion. That seems anatomically improbable. Jasper laughed. It's a saying. It means that cooking for someone, or taking them to eat good food, is a way of showing you care about them. Ah, a metaphor. We have similar concepts. Kivara relaxed slightly. Though I must say, human idioms are quite confusing. I read another one that mentioned eating out. Is this also related to courtship feeding rituals? Jasper froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Oh no. Oh, this was going to be awkward, he said carefully. That one has multiple meanings. In one context, yes, it means going to a restaurant. In another context, he hesitated, trying to figure out how to explain this to an alien who was looking at him with such innocent curiosity. It's slang for an intimate activity. Intimate. Kivara tilted her head. You mean sexual? Yeah, Jasper confirmed, feeling heat creep up his neck. It's when one person uses their mouth too. Provide pleasure to their partners. Reproductive areas. Silence that followed was deafening. Jasper watched as Kivara's purple skin darkened to almost indigo, and her eyes widened to an almost comical degree. You eat each other? She whispered, sounding both horrified and fascinated. As part of mating? Not literally eat, Jasper said quickly. No consumption involved. It's just oral stimulation. For pleasure, but you said eating. It's a euphemism. English has a lot of those. Kivara sat back in her chair, her silver tendrils practically standing on end. I thought humans were supposed to be evolved beyond primitive cannibalistic instincts. We are. Nobody's eating anybody. Jasper was very aware that several other diners were now glancing their way. He lowered his voice. Look, it's just a form of physical intimacy. Like kissing, but more intense? Kissing? Pressing mouths together. You don't have that? We have similar contact rituals, but nothing that involves... She made a vague gesture that somehow encompassed both mouths and reproductive areas. That sounds very unsanitary. Despite his embarrassment, Jasper found himself laughing. When you put it that way, I guess it does. But trust me, it's very much consensual and pleasurable for everyone involved. No actual eating. Kivara was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through confusion, fascination, and something that might have been curiosity. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. An intimacy is very strange. Well, I'm sure Xantharian intimacy would seem strange to me too, Jasper replied with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. Perhaps, Kivara said slowly. Then, meeting his eyes with an intensity that sent an unexpected shiver down his spine, she added, perhaps we should exchange cultural information on this topic. For academic understanding, of course. Of course, Jasper echoed, his heart rate kicking up a notch. Academic understanding. But the way she was looking at him suggested that academics might only be part of her interest. And if he was being honest with himself, his interest wasn't entirely academic either. This assignment was already proving to be far more interesting than he'd anticipated. Jasper woke to the soft chiming of his alarm and the violet-tinged sunrise streaming through his window. His first real day of work on Xanthara 5, he stretched, feeling the lighter gravity make his movements easier, and headed for the shower. The station's facilities had adapted surprisingly well to human needs, though the water had a faintly sweet smell that he was still getting used to as he dressed in his work clothes, comfortable pants, and a lightweight shirt suitable for greenhouse work. He found his thoughts drifting back to yesterday's conversation with Kivara, the way her eyes had widened when he'd explained the eating out euphemism, the deepening color of her skin that he was starting to recognize as a blush, the unexpected intensity in her gaze when she'd suggested a cultural exchange. He shook his head, grinning at himself in the mirror. Get it together, Reed. You're here to work with plants, not to develop a crush on your alien liaison. The dining area was more crowded at breakfast than it had been at dinner. Jasper grabbed his meal, something that resembled oatmeal but tasted like vanilla, and cinnamon, and looked around for a place to sit. He spotted Kivara at a table near the far wall, but she wasn't alone. Another Xantharian sat across from her, this one with skin that shifted between deep blue and teal. Her silver tendrils cut shorter than Kivara's in a style that seemed almost pixie dash-like as he approached. He caught the tail end of their conversation. This cannot be serious, Kivara. Humans don't actually eat their mates. That is what he said. Kivara insisted, her voice carrying more than she probably intended. He called it eating out, and said it was an intimate act involving mouths and reproductive organs. Jasper stopped dead in his tracks. Oh no. The blue-teal Xantharian noticed him first, her eyes going wide. She elbowed Kivara, who turned to see what had caught her attention. When her gaze landed on Jasper, her skin immediately darkened to that deep indigo blush. Good morning, Jasper said, committing to the approach despite wanting to sink through the floor. Mind if I join you? Please, Kivara managed, her voice slightly strangled. Jasper sat down, very aware of two pairs of curious eyes studying him. The new Xantharian leaned forward, her expression a mixture of fascination and disbelief. I am Nyx, she said without preamble. Kivara's roommate and fellow botanist. Is it true that humans practice ritualistic cannibalism during mating? Jasper nearly inhaled his breakfast. No, absolutely not. There's been a misunderstanding, Kivara said. I know what Kivara said, and I know what I told her, but clearly something got lost in translation. He looked at Kivara, who was studying her breakfast with intense focus. Can I try to explain again? Please, Kivara whispered, still not meeting his eyes. Jasper took a breath, very aware that several nearby tables had gone quiet, clearly listening. Great, just great. Okay, so humans have a lot of euphemisms, phrases that mean something other than their literal words for intimate activities. When I said eating out, I didn't mean actual consumption of flesh. I meant oral sex, which is when one partner uses their mouth to stimulate their partner's genital area for pleasure. No eating, no consumption, just physical intimacy. The silence that followed was absolute. Jasper watched as understanding dawned on Nyx's face, followed immediately by a grin that could only be described as mischievous. Oh, she said, drawing the word out. Oh, that makes much more sense, though it is still quite unusual. Xantharians would never think to use feeding orifices for reproductive activities. Different species. Different practices, Jasper said with a shrug, trying to sound casual despite his burning embarrassment. I'm sure you have customs that would seem strange to humans. Indeed we do, Nyx agreed, her eyes sparkling. For instance, Xantharians bond through synchronized breathing and the exchange of chemical signals through touch. Our skin produces pheromones that Nyx... Kivara cut her off, her voice sharp. Perhaps we should not share such intimate details in a public dining area. But you shared details about human practices, Nyx protested, though her grin suggested she was enjoying Kivara's discomfort. That was meant to be a private academic discussion. In the middle of the dining hall? Kivara made a sound of frustration, her tendrils writhing in what Jasper was learning to recognize as agitation. I did not realize the information would spread so quickly. Information always spreads quickly in a closed research station, came a new voice. Jasper turned to see a heavy-set Xantharian approaching their table, carrying a tray laden with cooking implements. Unlike the researchers, this one wore what appeared to be chef's attire, and his skin was a warm amber color that reminded Jasper of honey. Torin. Kivara looked relieved at the interruption. Have you come to rescue me from this mortifying situation? I have come to deliver food and wisdom, as is my role, Torin said with evident amusement. He set down several plates of fresh fruit at least. Jasper assumed they were fruit, though the colors ranged from electric blue to deep purple. And to observe the human who has caused such a stir among our usually staid research staff. I didn't mean to cause a stir, Jasper protested. I was just answering questions about human customs. Customs involving mouths and genitals, Nyx added helpfully. Thank you, Nyx, Kivara muttered. Torin's laugh was deep and warm. Ah, young ones. You forget that I have traveled extensively. I have visited Earth, met many humans. I understand their ways. He turned his knowing gaze on Jasper. Though I must say you work quickly. One day on station, and already discussing intimate practices with our lovely Kivara, it was purely academic. Kivara insisted, her blush deepening impossibly further. Of course it was, Torin agreed, his tone suggesting he believed nothing of the sort. Just as I am sure the way you have spoken of nothing but the human specialist's arrival for the past week was purely professional interest. Jasper felt his own face heat at that revelation. Kivara had been talking about him? Before he'd even arrived. Torin, please, Kivara pleaded, looking like she wanted to disappear. The chef took pity on her, patting her shoulder gently. I merely tease, little one. There is nothing wrong with finding another being attractive, regardless of species. The universe is vast, and connection is rare. We should celebrate it where we find it, not mock it. His words hung in the air, surprisingly profound coming from someone who had just been playfully tormenting Kivara. Nyx's mischievous grin faded into something more thoughtful, and Kivara slowly raised her eyes to meet Jasper's. I apologize, she said softly. I should not have discussed our private conversation with others. It was inappropriate. It's okay, Jasper replied, surprised to find he meant it. I'm not upset, just maybe a little embarrassed that the whole station now thinks humans are cannibals. I will make an announcement, Kivara said firmly, clarify the misunderstanding. Ensure everyone knows that humans practice oral sex, Nyx interjected. I am sure that will make things much less awkward. Despite himself, Jasper laughed. The absurdity of the situation was just too much. Here he was, on an alien world, discussing his species' sexual practices over breakfast with beings who had evolved on a completely different planet. It was ridiculous and mortifying and somehow wonderful all at once. His laughter proved contagious. Nyx started giggling, her shorter tendrils bouncing with mirth. Even Kivara cracked a smile, though she still looked mortified. Torin watched them with obvious satisfaction, like a parent watching children finally get along. There, he said approvingly. Laughter is the best response to embarrassment. Now, eat your breakfast before it gets cold. You have work to do, and the plants wait for no one. As Torin departed to attend to other diners, Jasper turned his attention to the fruit he'd been served. He picked up something that looked like a cross between a pear and a starfruit, taking a cautious bite. The flavor exploded across his tongue, sweet and tart, and completely unlike anything on Earth. Good? Kivara asked, watching him with interest that seemed to go beyond simple curiosity about his reaction to the food. Amazing, Jasper confirmed. What is it? We call it sunshine fruit. It only grows in the high-altitude regions of Xanthara. The flavor is supposed to be quite intense for species not adapted to our foods. I like intense, Jasper said, then immediately realized how that sounded. The flavor, I mean? The intense flavor. Nyx snorted softly, but when Jasper glanced at her, she was studiously examining her own breakfast. Kivara's skin had darkened again, but this time there was a small smile playing at her lips. I am glad you enjoy our cuisine, she said. Perhaps later I could show you the greenhouse where we grow these fruits. It is one of my favorite places on the station. I'd like that, Jasper replied, holding her gaze. I'm here to learn about Xantharian agriculture, after all, of course, Kivara said softly. Agriculture. That is certainly why you would want to spend time with me, was she? Flirting. Jasper felt a flutter of excitement in his chest. The cultural differences made it hard to be certain. But the way she was looking at him, the slight upturn of her lips, the subtle lean of her body toward his, it all seemed promising. Nyx said brightly. Standing up with her tray, I should get to the lab. Those gene sequences won't analyze themselves. Kivara, try not to discuss any more human sexual practices in public. At least not without inviting me to listen, Nyx. I joke. Mostly, with a wink at Jasper, she departed. Leaving him alone with Kivara and the remains of their breakfast, the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. Exactly, but it was charged with something Jasper couldn't quite name. Anticipation? Maybe? Possibility? I really am sorry, Kivara said again. About the misunderstanding. About telling others. I was just so fascinated. Humans are very different from Xantharians, and I found our conversation stimulating. Jasper couldn't resist the gentle tease. Kivara's blush returned full force, intellectually stimulating. Though I suppose... She hesitated, seeming to gather courage. I suppose I found it stimulating in other ways as well. Jasper's heart rate picked up. Yes, she met his eyes, her own bright with something that transcended mere academic interest. Is that inappropriate? Given that we are different species? I don't think so, Jasper said carefully. I mean, we're both adults. We're both sentient beings capable of making our own choices. If there's mutual attraction, he let the sentence hang, giving her space to respond. There is, Kivara said simply. At least from my side. I have found you attractive since reviewing your personnel file, if I am being honest. The reality of you is even more appealing than the photographs suggested. The directness of her statement was refreshing. No games, no pretense, just honest acknowledgement of attraction. Jasper found himself grinning. I find you attractive too, he admitted. Very much so. Though I have to confess, I don't know much about Xantharian courtship customs. I don't want to accidentally offend you or do something inappropriate. Then perhaps, Kivara said, rising from her seat with fluid grace, we should continue our cultural exchange. You can teach me about human customs, and I can teach you about Xantharian ones. Would you like to see that greenhouse now? Jasper stood as well, aware that several station residents were still watching them with interest. Let them watch. He was tired of second-guessing every interaction, of worrying about misunderstandings. Lead the way, he said, offering his arm in what he hoped was a universal gesture. Kivara looked at his extended arm for a moment before carefully linking her own through it. Her touch sent a pleasant warmth through his body, even through his sleeve. As they left the dining area together, Jasper caught sight of Torin watching from the kitchen entrance. The chef raised a spatula in what might have been a salute or a blessing. His amber face creased in a knowing smile. The greenhouse was a revelation. Jasper had expected something similar to Earth's greenhouse's glass and metal, its artificial lights, carefully controlled climate. What he found instead was a living cathedral. The structure itself was grown from massive tree-like organisms, their intertwined branches forming a lattice that filtered the violet sunlight into a warm golden glow. The air was thick with moisture and the sweet scent of growing things, alien and familiar, all at once. "This is incredible," Jasper breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. "It's not just a building, it's an ecosystem," yes, Kivara said, pleased by his reaction. "This is the oldest part of the station. The trees were planted 200 years ago and shaped as they grew. Now, they maintain themselves, requiring minimal intervention." She led him down paths lined with plants in every imaginable color. Some looked almost Earth-like, recognizable as flowers or fruits or vegetables, while others were completely alien, their forms defying easy categorization, here Kivara said, stopping before a vine covered in the sunshine fruits they'd eaten at breakfast. "This is where they grow." "Beautiful." "Yes, beautiful," Jasper agreed, but he was looking at her when he said it. Kivara noticed, her skin darkening in that now familiar blush. "You are not subtle, Jasper Reed. Should I be?" "No," she said softly. "I think I prefer your directness. It is refreshing after a lifetime of Xantharian reserve." She reached up to touch one of the fruits, her fingers gentle on its skin. "We are taught to be cautious with our emotions, to think carefully before acting. But with you, I find myself wanting to act without thinking." Jasper stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her scent, something like ozone and flowers. "Is that a bad thing?" "I do not know yet," Kivara admitted. She turned to face him fully, her hand dropping from the fruit to rest lightly on his chest. "Your heart is beating very fast. It happens when I'm near someone I'm attracted to," Jasper said, echoing his words from their first conversation. "Oh, mine as well." She guided his hand to rest just above her left hip. Through her clothing, he could feel a rapid flutter, like the wings of a captured bird. Different physiology, same response. They stood like that for a long moment, hands on hearts, breathing synchronized. Jasper was intensely aware of every point of contact between them. Every rise and fall of her chest, every flutter of her silver tendrils. "Can I kiss you?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Kivara whispered. "Please." Jasper leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But she rose to meet him, and when their lips touched, it was electric. Her mouth was cooler than a human's, but soft and responsive. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, but it quickly deepened as they grew more confident. When they finally separated, both breathing harder, Kivara's eyes had darkened to a deep violet that Jasper was learning meant arousal. That, she said breathlessly, was much better than our academic discussion suggested. Jasper laughed, pulling her close. "Just wait until I show you what else humans can do with their mouths." Shvara shivered against him, her tendrils brushing his face like gentle touches. "I look forward to it. But perhaps," she glanced around the greenhouse, suddenly aware of their surroundings, "perhaps we should continue this somewhere more private. Your place or mine?" "Mine," Juvara decided. "I have been wanting to show you my quarters since you arrived, though I confess, my motivations were not entirely pure." "Good," Jasper said, taking her hand and intertwining their fingers. "I'm not looking for pure. I'm looking for real." As they left the greenhouse together, heading toward a privacy and possibility, Jasper reflected that this assignment was turning out to be the best decision he'd ever made. Who cared what the rest of the station thought or whispered? He'd found something unexpected and wonderful on this alien world, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. Behind them, hidden among the vines and flowers, the sunshine fruits glowed in the golden light, bearing silent witness to the beginning of something new.